Okay. So please confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Um, we are still on JavaScript, and we've spoken about a couple of concepts on JavaScript programming in general. Yes, Joseph. I can see your hand raised. You want to ask a question? Hello, Joseph. Do you want to ask a question? Your hand is raised. No. Okay. All right. We've spoken about few concepts on JavaScript. We've talked about how we create a JavaScript file and how we import it into our HTML code. So we have the changes or the implementations done on our HTML code, and also we spoke about the data types in JavaScript programming, and we spoke about the non-primitive and primitive data types. And I said those data types are almost the same data types for every programming language, either Python or C++ or C Sharp. So the primitive data types remain the same for almost all of them, although they might have slight changes in their names, but I'm convinced they all have the same data types. So where there would be small differences would be the non-primitive data types. And for JavaScript, we spoke about two of those data types, and we said one of them is an array, and then the second is an object. And we said the non-primitive data types are basically used in order to structure a particular data. So because a string can only have one word in it or a sentence, right? But it can hold different values, different strings inside of it. And there comes about either an array or an object wherein you can put as many strings as you want to be stored inside of it. And then we talked about some methods of array. And I said methods are basically functions tied to a particular data type. So we talked about strings method, and the one we talked about was dot length. Where we said dot length is used to return the length of a string. It's also used for an array. So they are similar. Length method is similar for both a string and an array. And we talked about different other array methods like push, which is used to add an item to the last position of an array, and pop is used to remove the item from the last part of the array. And then we went to shift and unshift, where we said shift is used to move from the first, while unshift is used to add. So it's like the opposite of pop and push. Then we talked about blank and type, and we saw how we use it in those methods, right? So the important thing I wanted to note is that those methods are of functions. carry out a specific task, right? They carry out a specific task. And so you don't have to rewrite the code that he uses to carry out the operation. All you have to do is code the name as many times as you want on any object you want, and it will carry out that task for you seamlessly. And then we went on to talk about conditionals. We talked about the events, and we said you can you can have an if statement by having the if keyword first and then your parenthesis where your condition goes in. So whatever condition you put in here, so as long as it is true, it will run whatever option you want it to carry out in this block, right? So for sure you need another condition to be tested, then you create an else if, and then you put in another condition here. Let's see if the condition is true. So once it is true, then it runs the operation, whatever operation it is you want it to run. So, but if you want some other operation to be carried out, regardless of if all the conditions were false or not, then you use the else. So else is like a default block. So when all your conditions fail, your else block will automatically run by default. So when your if block fails, it keeps this operation. If your else if block fails, keeps this operation. So when this block finds out that the else and the if block have failed, then it carries out its own operation by default. This is how we give. And we said there are a few other types of conditionals like switch, where switch uses cases as many cases as wants to be considered. But we have to skip that part and focus on if. Okay. So moving on to yet to be that we spoke about concepts like iteration. And we said iteration basically means repetition, like loop, just moving in circles, carrying out one specific task continuously, so long as the condition is met, you keep doing it. Once the condition is now false, you stop doing it. So the type of iteration method we looked or talked about was the for loop. So let me just comment it out here. For loop. So there are other types of loops. There's a while loop, there is two while loops, and they are all similar. So if you know the for loop, if you understand the idea between the things the for loop, it will be easy for you to incorporate the same principle to the while loop and to while loop. So we spoke about iteration, and then we went on to function, and we said it's a reusable line of code that carries out a specific task. So while we talked about methods and we saw what they did, we said methods were already written codes, already written functions, right, in JavaScript. So for us to write, there might be some things you want to do that there are no methods created for them already. So it means you would have to create your own function for you, for yourself. And when you do that, then it's called you're customizing your function. And we talked about it yesterday where we said you have to first declare a function, and we did that here. Let me just you said function declaration. So function declaration basically means creating your function. We said to do that, firstly, you start with the function keyword, after the function keyword, then whatever name you want that function to have should be what follows up, right? So after the function keyword, you give a space and then the function name. So try to make it descriptive in short such a way that someone can easily see your function name and have an idea of what that function is supposed to do. It doesn't have to be a sentence. It doesn't have to be so long, but there are ways to join words together to form a function name. And if you check here, I combined a couple of words, which is text. This is text. Let me try to zoom in a little bit. So I joined, the first word was text, and then to, that is TO, and then uppercase, which is looking somewhat funny because I started the first word with a small letter, right? Then continue the remaining part of it with small letter, which is text. But now when I went to the second one, the first alphabet is a capital letter, then what follows it is small. And then over to the next word, which is uppercase. The first alphabet is in capital case, while the rest are in lowercase, right? So this is what we refer to as camel case. Camel case, right? So it's a convention used in JavaScript or programming as a whole, such that when someone sees the function, they know, okay, you're adding a couple of words together, all right? But you didn't, but so it sees where the first one starts and ends. It sees where the next word starts and also ends, right? So it won't change anything if I make these small letters, right? It won't make any difference. But now, it just looks difficult for me to understand that these are words, different words joined together. But when they are in capital case, right? This way, you understand each of the words that were joined together and you get the concept of the function. So you can see text clearly, to and upper. Right? So this is what we call camel case. When the first alphabet of the first word is in small letter, just like the remaining words are. But then every other word after the first word, the first letter is always capital. So we said you can, whenever you put in a value, in your function declaration parenthesis, you make that value a parameter. It is called a parameter. Okay. So after the parameter, then you start your block. So it is whatever you carry out between this open and close curly brackets. That is the operations that will be carried out every time you call that function. And we talked about what this function does. And we said just writing a function is not enough, right? So once you write a function or you declare a function, for it to actually carry out whatever operation you've given to it, you have to call the function. And how do you call a function? You call a function using the function name. After the function name, then you use your curly brackets. So if you don't put anything here, it means your function is not taking in any value. Okay, but once you put in something, whenever you're calling a function, that value is called or referred to as an argument, right? So that is what we did here. And with this, we finished up last week's class. So now we are going to talk about a very important concept today, and it is basically the DOM, right? The DOM. And DOM is short for Document Object Model, right? So what is the DOM? What is the DOM? The DOM is this document here that we'll be writing, these HTML codes we've been writing, right? So in layman terms, that's the best way I can explain what the DOM is. So everything you've been writing here, this document as a whole, is what we refer to as the DOM. So this today's class is going to tell us how we can effectively access different attribute elements from our HTML codes, right? And how we can start manipulating these elements to do what we want it to do, right? So that's what the DOM is about. And from here, there's a little theory that says HTML document is structured as the JavaScript object. Every HTML element has a different property, which can help to manipulate it. So it means this particular HTML element, this div, this first div, it has a property inbuilt that once you know those properties, you can be able to manipulate those properties to achieve a particular feature that you want your website to have. So that's what we're going to explore today. Considering this, it is possible to get, create, append, or remove HTML elements using JavaScript, right? So which means from this HTML code, it is able for us to get these elements in our JavaScript. That is first to get. So we can be able to get this, then decide to change whatever property we want to change. So if we don't want to get already created elements, we can also create an element in JavaScript, right? And then push it to our HTML code. So we are not writing the JavaScript elements in our the HTML elements in our HTML file. You can actually create a HTML element in your JavaScript and then watch it take form inside your web browser. Secondly, you can add that element you've created to your HTML code. Okay, so we'll be seeing these, all of this theory today. So, but first, let's see how we can get elements, right? Because we said just about getting an element, creating an element, and appending an element, and also removing. So when it comes to API, when you get to advanced programming, we refer to these things as CRUD operations, which is short for create, read, update, and delete, right? But not to worry. So firstly, let's see how we can be able to get elements. So it says we can access already created elements or elements using JavaScript. To access or get elements, we use different methods. So the code below has 4 HTML elements. Let us see the different methods to access the H1 elements, right? So I would love to use these examples given here. So I would like to create a new HTML code. So I won't do it in parent, I'll do it in our documents here. So let me create a new file, and then I would say dom.html. So the name of this HTML file is dom, right? So let me create my boilerplate like we did in our very first class. And now I'm going to copy this HTML, this element to our code, so our HTML file, right? And now I'm just going to link this script to JS file. So you can link one JavaScript file to as many HTML file as you wish. So remember, we already linked this JavaScript file to our index.html, right? We can also link the same script file to, let me close this other one so it doesn't distract us. Okay, let me link CSS. So we only have one JavaScript file, which is already linked to this index.html, right? As you can see here. But I can also link this same JavaScript file to this new HTML I just created. So which is here, I would say script say scripts, then inside here I'll pass in the routes. So because they're on the same folder, they're on the same level, I'll just write scripts.js. Okay, and now this is now linked to our JavaScript. So I'll just open this on our live server. So if you don't have Lifesaver, what Lifesaver does for us, like I said before, is that once you make any change to your HTML file, it immediately implements that change on your browser. So if you don't have Lifesaver, this is what you do. Inside your editor, which is your VS Code, right? You move over to this part that says extensions and you click on it. So when you click on it, you won't see, it won't look like mine at first. So you have to come to this search box and then write live server and wait for it to give you different options of live server. So to give you all the possible extensions that have that name. And then the one we want is this one, this live server by week. Reads weekday. So you see right now it's uninstalled showing for me because I have it installed. So for you, you will see install. And once you install, you have Lifesaver working for you. So how you use it is that whatever HTML code you want to be shown to run automatically on your browser, all you do is you right click on that HTML file. Then when this folder pops up, you would see this option that says open with Lifesaver, and then you open your Lifesaver. So from there on, every change you do, once you save it, automatically it works for your browser. You see the change working there. So to confirm that this is working, we've opened this up in our browser. So let's open up our developers toolbox and then go to our console if we see the operation written in our script file already. Okay, so we are having an error here that says uncaught reference error, condition is not defined, and we are getting this error from scripts.js, which means obviously that our script file is linked to our HTML code. So let's see what that error is trying to tell us. So if you go here, it says line 17. It says condition is not defined, right? Because we didn't define any variable as conditions. That's why we are having this error. So if you take this off, it will take out the error we are having. And when we go back, it carries out this function for us. So good. We have our link, our function linked there. So let's see the first thing we want to talk about. The first one we want to talk about is getting elements by tag name. So what it's saying is that we can get a particular element in with various methods, right? But the first method we want to test now is how to get them using the tag name. So which means this first element in our HTML code, this H1, right, that has a tag name of H1 and has a class of title and has an ID of first title, right? Then with it, its content inside says first title. So what is saying is this particular element, we can be able to get that element using different methods. But for now, the first method we want to try is how to get it using its tag name. And remember, the tag name is H1. Okay? So it says for us to get elements using its tag name, we use get elements by tag name method. So this is a method, which means this is a function attached to DOM that allows you get a particular element using its tag name. So just like I said, giving your functions descriptive names. If you read the name of this function, it says get elements by tag name. So this already gives you an idea of what this function will be able to do. you probably don't understand it to the fullest, but it gives you an idea that, okay, this function probably gets an element based on a tag name that I want. So if your tag name is paragraph, or it's a button, or it's a link, this function will be able to get it for you, right? Reading through it says takes a tag name as a string parameter, and this method returns a HTML collection object. An HTML collection is an array like objects of HTML elements, right? So basically what it means is that once you use this element to collect particular tag name, it gets all of those elements in your HTML code and stores each of them as items in an array. Okay, so that's what it's saying. That's what HTML collections are. They are like arrays, but they are more of objects of arrays. All right. So we are going to see them, or see how it works. So firstly, let's see how the syntax is. So the syntax for getting a particular element by its tag name is, first we use the document keyword, which means we want the entire document, the entire HTML file, and then followed by dot get elements by tag name. All right. So in other words, if you want to get an element using a tag name, let me take all of this off. So let me say getting elements by tag name. This is first. So the first thing you do is you write documents. Remember, this is DOM. So which DOM, which is documents object model. That's what DOM is. So to get elements by its tag name, the first thing you do is write document, right? So after document, the next thing is the function we want to use, which is get elements. So because this is a function in JavaScript already, you can see VS Code suggesting different methods for us. It says get elements by ID, get elements by class name, get elements by name or by tag name, and tag name NS. So what we want is tag name. So you can decide to write this out yourself, but so you don't make any mistake, it's better for you to just click on this and get it. The reason why I say to avoid mistake is this: you might innocently skip that there has to be an S on this element, and once you skip that, you get the function name wrong, so which means you'll not be able to get the particular element you're trying to get. So let's do this. So you should have an S, and after calling the function name, remember the next thing is your parentheses, right? So this is how we get elements by tag name. This is how you use that particular function. Okay. So for now, just this doesn't really make sense because all we did is call the function, but we didn't give it any particular tag name that we want to fetch, right? So for you to fetch a particular tag name of your choice, you have to pass in that tag name. So now, from this example used here, remember this is our DOM right now, this is our elements. So they want to get the H1 tag. So they passed in H1 as a string. So which means um this particular tag name, this element of H1, all right, we have to pass in H1. But we can't do this. We can't just write H1 like that. Because if you write it like this, JavaScript would think you're writing a variable name that is h1. So it means for JavaScript or for VS Code, it's seeing h1 as a variable that we created, probably like this. Let's h1 be equal to something, probably 0. Right? That's what it's seen as this. But this is not what we want. Instead, the name of that tag is h1. So it should be written as a string, which is it should be written inside either a single quote or a double quote or a template literal, which is this one we talked about, this one here, which looks like a single quote, but it's not. So with this, we've been able to get our elements by tag name, right? So um, from here, what they did is they are storing it inside a variable called all titles. So let's do the same. So to store this value or this element we've gotten, we have to store it inside a variable so that we can have access to it. And they use const to mean a constant. And then says all titles should be equal to this. So what this line of code does is that first, it will fetch all the elements in our HTML code that has a tag name of h1. And when it does that, it will now save all of those elements inside this variable. So for us to see them, we have to console.log the variable, all titles. Right. So on saving that, let's go back to our browser and see what we get. Let me take this off. Don't need this. So once it saves, in our console, we'll see something that looks very funny or very new to us. For now, it says HTML collection 4. See an array that carries in a couple of things separated with a comma. So let's, and beside it, you see this arrow here. So let's open up this by clicking on the arrow. So you see that this collection opens up, and then we have values inside. First, we have an item at this array of 0, right? So it's showing us the index of 0, right? Then the next is this second one. As you can see, as I begin to move my pointer across each of these elements, these values, it starts highlighting the value on our browser, showing us that this is a particular element you are hovering on at the moment, right? So which means the HTML collection is an object of array, right? So it is an object in which it is an object that stores a key and a value, and the key is the index of that item, right? So because you can see 0 here, and then you see a value 1 here, and you see a value. Okay, so it means our all attributes is a HTML collection, and then we can access each of the items inside with a particular index of our choice. So, but for now, we have that this HTML collection has 4 items inside, and those 4 items are all of our HTML elements of H1 that we've created. Remember, we have H1 that says first title, we have another H1 that says second title, and then we have another H1 that says third title. We also have this H1, but right now it is empty. There is no content inside of it. And that is why you can't see the fourth one in our browser. You can only see first title, second title, third title. So this here is how you get elements by their tag name. So I want to believe this is understood by everyone before I move on. But if it is not, you can ask your questions. Okay. So now that we have an idea that this will give you a HTML collection, right, of all of the tags that have that tag name, right? And then you have a key and a value pair, which means you can access each of the items using um, an index. It means right now all titles is giving us all of these H1 elements here. So it means if you want this first element, you can easily do that by giving it its index. So which means over here, if what I want to console.log is not the entire HTML collection, but rather the first HTML element, all I have to do now is use this square brackets and then put in the index of the element I want. And so if I put it 0, it will give me the first H1 element in that HTML collection. So if I save this and I go back to my browser, you can see here now that we don't have that HTML collection of 4 items anymore. What we have now is this H1 that resonates with this first item we have here. And if you check well, we have an opening tag from that has a class of title and an ID of first title, and then a content of first title, which is similar to what we have written here. So if you want the second element, it means all you have to do is change the index from 0, you change it to 1, and then you would have the second element printed out in your console. Okay, so this is how we assess each of these items one after the other. So for now, this is just the first method we can use to get an element. There are still other methods we can use to get the same element we want. So let's see the other method. So the other method says getting elements by class name. So let's check it out. So the first one is getting elements by tag name. So the next one should be getting elements by class name. And I want to believe you're already familiar with what a class name is, because from our HTML, we see that one of the attribute passed in here is a class. All right, so class is the attribute, then title is the value of that attribute. So it means we can be able to get a particular element based on the class we have specified it to have. So here we use the same method by saying documents dot get elements by, but now instead of tag name, we now use class name, right? And then we put in our parentheses. So here we no longer write H1 because we're not trying to get elements by tag name. We're trying to get an element based on its class. And the class of this element as well as these other elements. So it means instead of writing H1, which is the tag name, what we write now is the class name, which is title. So on writing this now, it means we'll be able to get this part, all of the elements that have a class name of title. And from here, okay, it was stored inside all titles. So let's go on to, let me push this one out of me. And here, let me comment this out so we don't have errors. So here we now see const or title equal to. So here now, would if I save this, let me take off this. Let me remove the index for now. So we see what is stored inside all titles. And we go back to our screen. We now see the same thing printed out, but now we now have a HTML collection, but it is no longer 4 items, but now it's now 3 items. And if you open it up, you see the first one at index of 0, the next one at index of 1, and the following one at an index of 2. So we now have 3 items inside. Okay. So now, why do we have 3 items? Which for now that has a class name of title, it only takes all the elements that has a class of title. Whereas we have 4 elements in our code, only 3 of them, which is this, has a class of title. This doesn't have a class. This to talk about a class name of title. So it doesn't fetch it, it only fetch these 3 items. And this is why we have 3 items in our HTML collection printed. So this here is the second method used in getting elements. The second method is getting element by the class. So let's go on to the next method. The next method is getting element by ID. So the reason why there are so many methods would be because you want to get all the elements based on the tag name, because then it takes so many elements. It, so based on what you want to get an item based on just its class name. All right. So that's it. So now the next method is getting an element by ID. Okay. So when we talked about tag, we said get elements. Okay. Take note of all of these small differences. So we said get elements because you can have more than one element sharing the same tag name, right? And also when we went to class, we saw get elements the class because you can also get one element that has the same class. So now when we came to ID, it says get elements by ID. But now, to not forget, right? Get elements. This is a table. We don't have S in this. Okay. So do not forget that an ID can only be one. You can only have one item or element having one particular ID. You shouldn't share a particular ID between 2 elements, right? So you can see it the way it says get elements by ID because it knows that an ID can only be one. So which means it is only one element in our entire DOM that can have that ID. So how do you use get elements by ID? I would comment this out here and come down and say getting elements by ID. Sorry. Okay. So using the same document, get elements by ID. So inside here, we now pass in an ID of our choice. Okay. So let's see which elements we got by ID. So the one we got was the first title. So let's see if you go back to our HTML, you see that this ID for this first element is different from this ID and is different from this ID. This element does not have any ID. So here now, if you now put in first title, make sure the value you put in here is the same as this. Because there's an hyphen here, what I'm doing here is I'm also putting an hyphen. You can't decide to say, let me just put space or join them together. No, it has to be the same. So with this, it will get the only element that has an ID of first title. And now let's see where it stored the variable. So it stored this inside the variable called first title. So it means we don't have to comment this out. But let me comment this out so it doesn't, we don't have so many things printed out on our console. So now I'm going to store this. I'm going to use let to create a variable. You can also use const to create a variable that says first title equals to this. So now if I console.log first title and we go back to our documents, so now we don't see a HTML collection anymore. So all we see is one particular element printed out on our console because that is the only element in our DOM that has that ID. So which means why get elements by tag name gives you an HTML collection, get elements by class name gives you an HTML collection, get elements by ID gives you that particular element you're trying to access directly. It doesn't give you a collection. As you can see, it says get element by ID targets a single HTML element. So we pass the ID without hash as an argument, just as we have done. So these, for now, are three different methods we've spoken about. Do not forget, first get element by tag name, get element by class name, and get element. So is there any question on these methods before we talk about the other methods of getting elements? Is there anything that isn't clear to you so I can go over it again? None? Okay. So the next would be getting elements by using query selector method. So the new method we want to introduce. I think the method is query selector method can select an HTML or HTML element by tag name, by ID, by class name. So which means you can use this particular method in place of using tag name if the name is used, it selects only the first element. So which means using query selector will always return one element for you. So let's see in practical what this means. So the first one they did is trying to get it. They tried to get using um, the tag name of each one. They try to use an ID of first title, and then they try to use a class of title. So let's repeat the same thing here for us. So we don't want this. Let me comment it out. So let me say using query selector. So the first thing you do is also document. But see your documents dot. So no more get elements now. You say query selector, which is this first one. So inside here, if you want to pass in a tag, you write h1, which is the tag name. So I'm going to create a variable here that says first title equal to. So we are getting an element, the element using query selector, and we're trying to get a tag, and then we are saving that tag name into this variable, which will be printed out in our console. So let's do this and see what it does for us. Remember that we have four different H1 elements in our DOM, which means we are expecting to fetch four different H1 elements. So when we go over here, we are actually expecting to see four elements or a HTML collection. But rather, what we are seeing is just one element, which means HTML query selector gets the first element and meets that criteria that I need. Okay? So because we are trying to get the H1 element, and the first H1 element emits in our DOM, this one, it is only to say document dot query selector, and inside here we are going to pass in the class name. So let's say the class name is title, right? Because this H1 has class of title, this one also. Okay. So for us, this seems to be correct. So let me just put it inside. Let me comment this out first, and then save it inside our variable called cost. Oh wow. So
Your
network.
screen is off. I can't see it.
Give me 1 minute.
You are mute.
Okay, sorry. You can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm trying to do here now is try to use selector to get the elements with a class of title. But when I do this and I save, just like we did here, we use get elements by class name and we put in title. So I'm doing the same thing here, but now I'm dealing with query selector, not get elements by class name. So when I do this, I save and I go over to my browser. So when I do this, I see something printed out, right? That says title document. In the tag of title, which is from our DOM, which is this particular element. This is not what we want. This is not what we want to get. All right. We're trying to get this. The reason is this: when you use query selector, you want to pass in the class name. Before class name, you put it in our CSS. When we want to get a class name, we use dots, right, before the class name. You do similar thing here. So this dots lets your query selector understand that whatever value you're putting here is you're expecting it to be a class name, not not a tag name. Okay, because when we use it here without anything, it was referred to as a tag name. So if I now save this and I go back to my browser, we now see this here printed out, which is showing us that we now have an element here of H1. So remember, this first one has a class of title. This one also has a class of title. And this here also has a class of title. But now we only were able to fetch one item, right? Which means query selector will always fetch the first item that meets that particular tag name or class name we want. So for you to use query selector for ID, it is similar to this. So only thing that changes is this. So while dot is used for class, if you want to get an element using the ID now and not the class, you no longer use dot, but now you use hash. Then you put in the ID name, which is second title. So I believe cramming this concept right now might not be so easy because this is the first time you've been exposed to it. But just knowing that there's something like this that goes on is enough knowledge in it for now. So all you need to do is that once you want to carry out this operation, you can easily go to Google or revisit this video or revisit your former code, and then you see how it is supposed to be done. And then you remember quickly, okay, this is how query selector should be used. Okay, so this is how we've been able to use query selector to fetch elements based on the tag name, based on the class, and now based on ID. So we see that you've used query selector to do these three things here. But now you can also use query selector to fetch all of the items that have that particular tag. Remember when we did query selector and we did this, it only fetched the first one. But there's another method that says query select all. Query selector, because to query selector all would be able to fetch all of the H1s for you. So what I mean is this: if I should comment this out, then uncomment this, and instead of query selector, I say query selector all. Let me change this variable to say headings. I save this here. Sorry. What query selector all will do is that it takes in similar variable, similar arguments like query selector. Now, it doesn't return the same thing as query selector. While query selector would return just the first each one it is, query selector all browser now. We now see a node list of 4 items, and when I open this up, you see each of these items. So now we are seeing something different called node list. So a node list is a little bit different from an HTML collection because there are some things you will do in the HTML collection you'll not be able to do in the node list. All right. But don't worry about that for now. We'll just see them as an object of array. Okay. And now you have 4 things inside of it. So tag name, class name returns a HTML collection, but query selector or returns a node list. Okay, so these are all the methods we use for getting elements. So it's either you use get elements by tag name, get elements by class name, get elements by ID, or you use query selector to get a tag name, a class name, or an ID. And also you use query selector or. So these are all the methods in JavaScript we use for getting elements. So all of what we've discussed so far is getting elements. But also, you can be able to add attributes, right? So remember what an attribute is. An attribute is these extra things inside your opening tag, right? And remember, this H1 doesn't have any attributes, doesn't have a class or an ID. So you can use JavaScript to add that. So let me clean up all of this. Let me go back to this first example where we use get elements by tag name and we said H1, which is fetching all of them for us. So if I save this, okay, I'm control the login heading instead of all titles. So I have my HTML collection. So here now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 placed in their respective indexes. So let's say now that I want, out of all these 4 elements, I want the last one, this H1, that doesn't have a class name. How do you think I can get it? The way I can get it is this index. Its index is 3. So the way I can easily get it is by saying get elements by tag name. I'm storing all of them here. Then I can say I want you to print out only the one at index 3. So when I do this now, you see it's printing out only these elements for us in our count. All right. So let's see how we can be able to add attributes. So it says an attribute is added in the opening tag of HTML with additional information about the elements. Common HTML attributes like ID, class, source, style, href, disabled title, there are so many, right? Let's add ID and class for the fourth title, right? So this one, it takes all of the items. And now over here, what this does is that it says take the fourth item and now go to the class.name property, the class name property, and make it this. So in other words, for our code here, we can decide to remove this side and say for all titles, we want just the item as index 3, which is the fourth item. And remember we said every element has a property that can be manipulated. So the property or the attribute you want to manipulate is the class name attribute. So you can say dot class name. Okay. Now, want to change its class name to be equal to something, and that class name should be title. Okay. So once you do this, once you do it, it will immediately give it a class of title. And now we also want to add an ID. So while we use this line to create a class and give it a class of title, we can also give this a class, an ID rather, dot ID of fourth title, an ID of fourth title. So remember your code, it will still stay the way it is. But now let's go to our browser and go to elements. Right. So this is our slide DOM. Let's open up body. And this is the fourth item now, the fourth element. So if you check properly now, whereas in our HTML, it doesn't have a class and an ID, we can now obviously see that it has a class of title and an ID of title. All right. So this is how we were able to add class and ID in our browser, right? So which means if in our CSS, let me just go down. If in our CSS we happen to have a particular style for, let's say, hash, the hash is to signify that it's an ID. So let's say fourth title, and we say it should have a width of 20 pixel, and then a background color of red, right? So this is what we have now. So I'm saying, let's say we have such CSS in already in our CSS file, right? If we now go to our browser, so because okay, so we don't have it showing here. So let's see. Okay, we are not importing this style.css in our DOM.html. So let's import that style here by using link CSS style.css. So let's see it. If we now do that, you will now see a red object, a red box, all right, of with 20px height, 20px, and a background color of red here our in our browser, right? Because there's a style for it, and we'll be able to add these attributes. So this is how JavaScript helps you manipulate things. So you can see probably on the click of a button, that's how you want to create this, right? So until you click on the button, it doesn't carry out this property or this function or this interactiveness, right? So this is how we'll be able to add a an attribute of class called title and an attribute of ID with a value of fourth title, right? So this is the first one. So you can also do it by using set attributes, but this is to me this is a long method from this one, because now you have to say set attributes and signify which attribute you want to give to it, which is class first, and then you go on to give it the value you want it to have, right? Whereas you can just do it seamlessly like this. So these two, this code here and this code here does the same thing, right? So there's no need. So that is first. So this one is class list. Class list basically means you want to add up another class to your already given class, because you can give an element more than one class name, right? So so class list is when you want to refer to all of the items in your class or all of the class names of a particular element. So that's one. So just as we can add class, you can remove a class, right? So removing, we use the class list to remove. Okay, but that will be probably for another day. So this is how we can add an attribute. So let's see how we can do something else. Let's see how we can add a text to our HTML elements, right? So remember that this element, this first or first title and give it this, we now have a box there. So let me just remove this style first and go back to our code, then our browser. Okay, so it is out. So now let's see, we want to give it a text of first title, like dynamically using JavaScript. It is very possible. How do you do that? We do that by accessing a very important JavaScript property called text content. Okay, so if we come here and we say all titles dot text content. Oh, sorry, we want not all titles as a semicolon. The fourth element, which is at x3, then we see dot text. So fourth title, and we save it here. So going to our browser, you now see fourth title showing up here, even though in our HTML code that we wrote ourselves by default doesn't have a content that particular element. So you can see how we can now make things interactive. So by default, you can say maybe you want to have a button. When you click on that button, it adds this, right? That on later class. Or if we can talk about it today. But this is how you add items. So just to know, for you to add a text to an element, use the text content. So you have to attach that particular property that says text content. You can also use inner HTML. It's almost the same thing as using text content, right? So just for inner HTML, you can also add another element inside it. We'll see we'll see that when we take up a project. Okay. So you can also change style CSS, although I don't recommend this, but you can also see how it's done. Yeah. Basically, this is how we can get elements in our JavaScript. You get HTML elements in JavaScript. Then you can decide to either add a class or add an ID. Also add content inside of it. And down here, I have different exercises. Says create an HTML.index file and put 4p elements as above. Get the first paragraph using document.query, selector, tag name, and the rest of them. So these are like repetitions of what we've just done today. It's just like exercises to help you get accustomed to what we are talking about today. So that would be it for DOM, right? So the next is manipulating DOM objects. All right. So this part is similar to what we've just spoken about, right? It's similar to the same thing because this is just talking about how we can create a you can get the elements, right? You can create the elements, you can delete the elements, and you can update the elements. So let's see how we can create an element. So HTML, I mean HTML, not JavaScript now. Create an element based on the element tag. Probably want to create a paragraph tag, so you just write. So we want to see how we can do similar here, how we can do it in JavaScript, but create element in JavaScript name. You all you have to do is do document dot create element, and then you put in whatever time you want to put in. So from here, what they did is they created and I am asking to a variable of title. Yeah, here this line they used to create a class name. They gave it this. They decided to do some CSS here by giving it a font size of 4 and then they changed the content to creating HTML elements, HTML two elements. Right. So with this, all this we do is they would just create that particular element, put in these values, and then control it. Right. But you also have to be able to append it. So which means once you create an element, you have to append it so it would show on your DOM. What I'm trying to say is this. So let's say we want to create an element, right? We can come here and say document dot create elements. So what kind of element to create a paragraph, right? So once I create this, let me quickly store it inside a variable. So I will say const para. Let me say the variable name is para equal to document.create elements of para. So here I've created a paragraph element and I've stored it inside this variable. That's all I've done. So if I just save this and I go back to my browser, I don't see it here. It's not showing here in our page. It's not showing here in our DOM, right? So I can go further to um, give it a class, give it an ID. It's fine, but that won't make any much difference. So what I want to do now is I want to change its contents, right? I want to give it a content, and also I want to append. Okay, this is dumb. This is not okay. So we've been able to create that element, but we're not giving it any value because it is empty right now. So for us to do that, all we have to do is say para dot text content should be equal to. Let's just customize the text. Say I created a paragraph elements. So this is what we want its inner contents to be, and we save it, right? So with this line of code, just this two line of code, we've created a paragraph tag, and we've also given it a content, right? But now we cannot see it still on our page, but we want it to be shown on our page. That's the essence of this topic now. So how do we show? All right, we show it by appending it into a parent element, right? So a parent element is basically already an element in your screen already. So over here, what they did is they went to documents.body, body being this tag, this body tag here. Okay, so they want to append it to the body. So we can do similar thing here by saying after here we say documents dot body, right? It goes to body, then we say dot append child, which means you want to put a child inside body. Okay, so now remember what we've created is paragraph, and the content we're giving to it is this. So you can just put in paragraph, which is the variable that holds this element we've created. And with this here, once you save now, and we go to our documents, we now see our paragraph now in our page. And also we have it here in our elements here saying paragraph of this. So because what append does, it puts it at the ending, right? That's why we now see our script file before our paragraph, which is not right. So if I don't want to put it in paragraph in body, right? So in let's say in this tag we had a div tag somewhere here, right? We had a div tag here, and we wanted to put that paragraph be so that to be something like this inside here. It can be done. So first, using um the concept in talking about, first fetch this div tag in our JavaScript. So which means first we have to document dot, let's say, query selector, and then inside here we put div. Okay, so we can decide to first store it inside a variable. Let's say it will div container equals this. So it means this container is the variable where we are storing this particular div we're trying to access. When we do that, we can now say div container dot append child, and we save this. So going back to our browser, you can still see that paragraph is here, but now it is not like directly inside the body. So it is not like a child of body, but instead it's now a child of this div that we've created. Right? So we've created a paragraph, we've given it a text content, and now we've appended it into this div container we've created. So which means before you're able to do anything on any element in your HTML, you have to first get your JavaScript using that query selector or get element by tag name and the rest of them. Then you can now manipulate whatever you want. So this here is how you put an element, create an element, and then also append an element. So is there any question on this?
Okay. Well, none actually, rather than to me, it looks a bit technical from where we are coming from, but with these resources we are displaying now, I think I can still go over it gradually. Then I will still have questions, but let me still go through them and understand certain things first. But probably not tonight.
Okay, okay, no problem. So whenever you go through read the code or do again, and you start anything you don't, then you can throw your question either on the group or maybe you want to wait till our next meeting, then you can ask your question. It's fine. So for so it's not that at least we've been exposed to this concept now on JavaScript. So everything we've been doing before, basically to understand the concepts of programming in general. But this here, this DOM here is something that is specific to JavaScript because it has the power of manipulating objects in our DOM. So that's why DOM is not something you see anywhere else. It is only for JavaScript. Right? It's not a JavaScript programming language, but rather it is something that your browser allows you um have access to using JavaScript. Okay. So this here is the idea of DOM and DOM manipulation. When we click on it again, it removes something. So, but it is still missing one very important aspect, which is event listeners. So, this I don't want to give to us today. I want us to digest the DOM, the idea of DOM properly for this week. So I'll give us from now till next week, next meeting, so we can properly understand some of the basic concepts. Then we talk about event listeners. Then we finish up our projects. So this is where I'll be running off today's class. But for us to have something doing, I'm going to throw up a simple assignment in the group so you can keep testing your knowledge. So please, every assignment you do, for now, every assignment you do should be stored in a folder, and then you push that folder to Google Drive, and then you send us the link. So the reason is your certificates are not just based on your attendance and your final projects. It's also based on the assignments you do because that we get the feeling that you're following up on the classes and the rest of them. So if there's no other question or contributions, I would see you all on Saturday, the same time, 7 p.m. to continue the class. So thank you very much.
I think.
All right.